afternoon. Welcome to the Smith and Hesson podcast. I'm Laura McGoldrick. Very excited to be with you today because there's a bit happening in the cricket world of late. We've got Ian Smith, who's coming to us from sunny Hawke's Bay, and Michael Hesson, who is joining us from New Zealand, a quarantine facility. Hess, I'm going to start with you. I know how beautiful India is. It must have just broken your heart to leave in the circumstances in which you did.
Yeah, it certainly did, Laura. There was obviously every day we were looking at what was happening around the country, and it was pretty horrific. And obviously everybody back home in New Zealand was well aware of it too. So we in many ways were removed from it because we were in our little bio bubble and pretty much just at the hotel and at the cricket ground. So we were a little bit removed, and so when it all started to go Etsy, we knew that it was time to leave, and it all happened pretty quickly.
Smithy, from what we could see back here, it certainly seemed to change quite quickly, didn't it?
Well, it did, and you know, if you've been to India, you understand the passion that they've got for cricket, and you can understand why they hung on as long as they possibly could because it's a real lifeline for a lot of people, and it's something they really look forward to. Having said that, Laura, those scenes that we were seeing on the news bulletins and things were making it almost impossible to believe that, you know, you could carry on and just have a cricket tournament. And I was not surprised in the end that they pulled the plug on it. I think it was exactly the right thing to do. And, you know, out of respect for life, I think, and the fact that so many people were in such desperate situations that it was very hard to continue.
It absolutely was, and he's really tough for Tim Cipher and his family, as he was obviously the Kiwi, got that tested positive just before he flew out. That must have been tough for you as a coach, as a fellow Kiwi, to leave him over there.
Yeah, well, we were actually already in mid-air, so it was on 2 flights. So we'd already left. So by the time we arrived in Tokyo, we got the message that Tim had tested positive. So yeah, I mean, everybody on our plane were absolutely horrified, and just thinking if we were in those shoes, then, you know, how we would be feeling. So, yeah, obviously that rest of that group had to jump on a plane later the day, saying goodbye to Tim, and, you know, I'm sure he'll be well looked after, but it's still nothing like home. So yeah, I'm sure everyone's best wishes are with him at the moment.
Yes, they absolutely are, Tim. We hope you get well very, very, very soon. So, Hess, can you see any way that you could finish the tournament at this stage? Does it look likely that you perhaps, I mean, is there talks of it maybe happening in Dubai, UAE? Is that a potential option for you?
Yeah, look, it is. Certainly there's been plenty of talk already about trying to complete the tournament. So they could potentially do it in just over 3 weeks with the whole of the double headers. So I think the only way it would work is if it was at the same venue as the T20 World Cup. So once that's finalised, then obviously they'll need to manage the two. They wouldn't be able to do it at 2 different venues because of the extra quarantine period and trying to fit in that extra tournament. But there's so much money at stake, Laura. They're certainly going to leave no stone unturned trying to make it happen.
No, I certainly wouldn't have thought so. So, Smithy, what do you think? Do you think it's worth finishing off? I mean, there is the T20 World Cup, obviously, we have to worry about to find where that might potentially go, because I don't see it honestly happening in India, and I'm sure you don't either. Do you think it's worth trying to really push and get this IPL finished off?
Yeah, I do, for a number of reasons, Laura. You know, first of all, it's a very important date on the world cricketing calendar now, and you know, it's an iconic event. And because of that, it affects a lot of livelihoods. It affects, you know, a lot of things that are important, not just in India. There's a lot of people who are outside of India who are affected with it as well. Providing they can find the environment and a window to play it, and I think it just makes sense to do that. And I think once people see that back up and running again, they'll be a lot more confident about other things in life as well, and other things in terms of cricket. So, and it'll be a good, I think if they played it before the ICC T20 World Cup at a similar venue, it'd be a nice little dress rehearsal for everyone to get in the mood, get used to the conditions, because a lot of those players, of course, in the IPL will be playing in that tournament too. So I just think it makes sense, and as soon as they can get world cricket back up and running again after this major hiccup, the better.
Yeah, well, it's all a learning process, isn't it? We've got to keep evolving, keep changing, as does COVID. So let's talk about the Blackcaps, who have now headed over to England to prepare for that Test series and then the World Test Championship. Hess, how do you think those boys will be feeling getting on that plane? For a lot of them, they won't have left New Zealand for maybe 18 months.
Yeah, well over a year since they played an overseas tour, so unless they've been involved in the IPL or something similar. So, look, there'll be real excitement. I mean, obviously, with the carrot of the World Test Championship in a few weeks' time, I see they've booked into Southampton hotel there. I mean, nothing best than the Lord's Test to start the tour with. And it's an exciting tour at the best of times, let alone with the World Test Championship finish. An extended squad, some fresh faces, so just some huge excitement and just keen to get on the training park, I'm sure.
Smithy, as what happened with the IPL, Trent Boult has come home with the bulk of the New Zealand players, so we'll be set to miss the first and possibly the second Test match. Who do you think will replace Boult within those first couple of tests?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point, Laura. There's a few options for me. They could just play 3 quick bowlers, and then they'll put some more opportunities for genuine all-rounders or spinners to compete for places. So I think there's that. The logical option for me, though, if they're looking to go for a straight-out replacement, would be Matt Henry into the group. The reason I say that is that Matt Henry was unbelievably good for Kent at this time of the year a couple of seasons ago. He was just mind-blowingly successful. He's the kind of guy who comes into that side and it looks like he's just putting a glove back on. He's so used to coming and going. I think if, whoever they play, they must have a serious opportunity or a serious chance of playing in that World Test Championship final. And in terms of experience, Matt Henry would be the guy for me. I mean, I'd love to see Dougie Bracewell have a go and maybe one or two of the others to have a bit of a fly as well. But I think whatever they do in this short window, it's got to be directed towards the World Test Championship. So if I had to pick one tomorrow, and injuries, who knows what's going to happen in terms of injuries in those first 2 Test matches, Matt Henry would probably be my guy.
Hess, would you agree, Matt Henry, your man too?
Yeah, look, I think 2 good options, but I think the experience with the Duke's ball that Smithy's just alluded to in recent times, his record with the Dukes can't be underestimated. He also bowled really nicely at Lord's in a previous Test match. So I think it's pretty much a straight swap and don't change the balance of the squad.
So how do the boys approach these 2 tests, given what's on the line with the World Test Championship, Smithy?
Well, they play all their batsmen. All the guys that are going to play, they must have as many innings as possible before the World Test Championship. I think it's a given now that Conway is going to start. He's going to have an opportunity. And the theory we had about being unlucky, for Bundle, I know that it is unlucky because he's played very well and you can't underestimate a Test century at the MCG. But what I will say about his position now that BJ Watling, and we're going to talk about that shortly, I'm sure, has announced his retirement, is pretty much assured in the side in a slightly different role. So whilst it will hurt him not to play in that, I think Conway's a better player from what I hear and what I see, and I just think it makes sense.
I want to ask about one more batsman who's just scored his 2nd century over in England, and that is, of course, Will Young. Hess, is there a place for him in your first 2 tests?
Look, I think the only chance would be if Ross Taylor's hamstring is not 100% fit. So, they're going to have to make that decision whether they think Ross can play 3 tests in a row or whether potentially he either plays one, has a rest, or vice versa. And Will Young certainly would deserve an opportunity there in the middle order, which I think is probably where he's best suited. I know he scored the runs at opening for Durham, but I think his best role is sort of 3 or 4. So that would be the only opportunity. I mean, Smithy's point about getting the batsman as many opportunities as possible is the ideal scenario. The fact Will can continue to do that playing for Durham is a good sign as well.
Now, Smithy, you just mentioned BJ Watling after 73 tests, or he'll play 3 more over in England, but he's pulling stumps on his career. Smithy, he has been an absolute stalwart in that side. He's a real nuggety, gritty batsman and fantastic behind the stumps. New Zealand is really going to miss him in this Test side, aren't they?
Yeah, well, Bradley John is the name we're talking about. Bradley John Watling got BJ in our hearts and our cricketing thoughts for such a long time now. He'll be severely missed. Blackcap number 244. I'm not quite sure what number they're up to now, but he's seen a few come and go in his time. 76 Test, Laura, averaging 38.11. Now, I thought that over the years that there were times when BJ Watling could have batted 6 on a lot more occasions for New Zealand. I think his numbers would have improved. He's that good a player. 800s so far, 1950s. Highest partnerships of the 6th and 7th wicket he's featured in. And, these are just numbers. Highest score 205, which is the highest scorer or the biggest score ever by a New Zealand wicketkeeper, first and only double century. I look at him and I think, New Zealander through and through. I know he's born in South Africa, but he epitomises to me what New Zealand cricket and the New Zealand cricket team is all about. And that is heart and soul, hard work, making the most of your opportunities and being reliable. And that's what he's been. He's been a backbone for Kane Williamson and a number of captains over the years. So but I know Hess has had a lot to do with him. He's been hands-on with him, and I'm pretty sure that Hess will agree that he'd be happy that he's had BJ Watling in his team over the years. His glove work has got better and better and better. His error rate is pretty minimal. It's all subjective. A lot of people, when they pick their best ever New Zealand 11, they'll always have Brendan in there because it's a nice fit with Brendan's brilliance with the bat and then his glove work as well initially in his Test career. But in terms of absolute tradesmen, if I had to pick, and I wanted my keeper to be there day in, day out and part of the heart and soul of the team, I couldn't go past BJ Watling, and I can't really say much more. A brilliant career, and a guy who's made the most of his opportunities while he's had to sit back, and others have made a lot more money, I'm sure, playing white ball cricket around the world. And, he hasn't been picked very often in those situations. It must have weighed on his mind at times whether it was all worthwhile, but he's hung in there, hung tough, and a fitting farewell at Lord's. I can't think of a better place in the most important Test match New Zealand have played probably ever. He's been brilliant, BJ Watling. Love him to death. Love him like a son. Can't say much more.
Yeah, I'm tearing up, Smithy. That's a beautiful tribute to BJ. Now, Hess, you have worked really closely with him in your tenure as New Zealand coach. What was he like? Because he seems like quite an unassuming bloke, quite quiet. Is he like that around the team?
Look, he is. When he does speak, people certainly listen because it doesn't happen that often. He just turns up to training, goes about his work, knows exactly what he needs to do to prepare himself, doesn't overdo it. And I've sort of described him as a tinkerer in the past because he turns up, he's always trying to develop and evolve his game. There was talk about better as he goes, and I think that's the way he's always lived his career in terms of turning up to try and be better and excel. But he was just the epitome of a team man, really. You could lock and load. You knew exactly what you were going to get every day. Whether you've been in the park for 150 overs, he would still be incredibly professional in terms of the way he would go about it. There's been a lot of talk about the fact he scored tough runs, and he certainly did that. He also did it when the side was going through some tough times. He would keep his standards incredibly high. He was the guy that, you're right, the captain would always go to for ideas in terms of how we could change the pace of the game or potentially try and create an opportunity. And when he spoke, as I said, everybody listened because he certainly put a huge amount of thought into it. But just a thorough professional, a guy that everybody in the team would turn to for advice if required, and he'd be willing to give it. And he also had a bit of a cheeky sense of humour as well, which would certainly added something to the vibe as well.
He looks to have great relationships with all the bowlers on the field as well. You talk about partnerships with the bat, but also with the bowling, Wagner, Southey and Bolt particularly. How easy is it to create that sort of relationship, that chemistry on the field, Smithy, as the wicketkeeper?
Well, it's vitally important. You've got to build a relationship because the bowlers have got to have the ultimate confidence in you. If I go back to the Arc when I played with Hadley and Chatfield and those guys, there was a lot of communication from them to me in terms of line to bowl, length to bowl on a certain pitch, etc. Because the wicketkeeper is probably in the best place to judge pace and bounce on a consistent basis. So look, there was a lot of that, but I think you just feel comfortable. When Southey and Bolt and Wagner and all those guys are running in the bowl, they see BJ Watling at the other end with the gloves on, and they are very comfortable with what's going to happen. If they create an opportunity, his percentage rate is so good, they know that he's more than likely going to get it. But just knowing that he's part of that partnership, I mean, he will be missed. Tom Blundell will do a good job, and he's a very good tradesman as well. But Watling will take some replacing over a period of time because, as Mike says, he's been so reliable. He's been the go-to guy, and those guys are missed more often than stars sometimes.
You're exactly right. Now let's talk about the New Zealand contract list because it was announced last week. There's 2 new names in the 20-man contract list, and that is, of course, Daryl Mitchell and Glenn Phillips. Ajaz Patel drops out. What did you think of that move, Hess? Given that there's going to be a lot of time, I imagine that Ajaz is required this year, or certainly if there were to be games in India, and there's also a test series against India later in the year to mention. Were you surprised they dropped Ajaz out?
Look, I wasn't, just because the priority appears to be the T20 World Cup. There's certainly a lot more white ball cricket than there is test match cricket. And also, Ajaz, especially in New Zealand, certainly not guaranteed to play. So therefore, his ranking would be a bit lower. So it looks like that's where Glenn Phillips has snuck into the list. Obviously, T20, and then he's a fixture in the current 11. Obviously, he'll probably be in the fringes. And he did okay when he came into the Australian Test Series. So he will get some Test match points. So I guess that's the way the current structure works. If you're able to get points in all 3 forms, you just slide up the list a little bit. So I do feel for Ajaz because his opportunities, as you said, are few and far between, and he's probably only ranked in 1 form of the game. So that's probably how it affected him.
No surprises. I don't think that Daryl Mitchell got a contract this year, Smithy.
No, not at all. Daryl Mitchell has been an outstanding player, and you talk about a guy who's cashed in when the chance has arisen. I mean, he has been fantastic in that area. He's a good kid. He's got a future in the game. He covers a lot of bases across the board in all forms of the game as well. He's got that wonderful all-round attribute that is such an important cog in any wheel of cricket these days. So the more of those guys you can slot into your T20 and one-day sides in particular, gives you much more opportunity for balance in your side. He's classy. He's had a good success rate in a limited amount of time. So I'm really, really happy for Daryl Mitchell that he's got some surety and some backing all of a sudden to the extent where he knows he's safe financially for a year or two. And I do feel, again, for Ajaz Patel, he's tried his darndest when he's had a chance. New Zealand spinners don't often do that well in New Zealand conditions, and that, of course, is where New Zealand have been playing all their cricket of late. And that's where their record is so good. So I feel for him, it's a bit of a kick in the guts for spinners, and they haven't had the best of runs over the years. But he's just a victim, really, of circumstance more than a victim of him being a poor player.
Daryl Mitchell, one of the things I love about him is the passion as well. When he got that 100, and just we had so limited one days this year, that one day where he scored his debut century, I was in tears. I was so excited for him. He was jumping all over the show. I loved it. Another showman, though, is Glenn Phillips. So I wasn't really surprised. I mean, he came into your side, I think, first, actually, and you had a look at him. You know what he's capable of. Were you surprised to see him get a contract, or it's quite fitting that now he gets it?
No, look, I mean, I guess I alluded to it before, the fact he's across all 3 forms to a degree, well established in the T20 format. He's also got plenty of experience around the world now in T20 cricket, which is useful, especially with the T20 World Cup in mind. He's one of those characters, isn't he, that just adds a lot of energy to the group, creates things in the field, bats in a tough role in that middle order, and he adds a whole heap of impetus to the side. Even if they're sort of drifting a little bit through the middle, he can come in and add something. So, look, I think it's a really good addition to the list. I mean, unfortunately, someone has to miss out. As I said, delighted for Daryl. The way his game's evolved in the last couple of years, from being a good first-class cricketer who was a bit conservative to now someone who actually takes the game on a bit more, is a great to see that evolution in his game.
Smithy, do you like what you see as Phillips as a player?
Well, Phillips has got X factor. He's a game winner. They pulled him into the test match at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and he looked okay there. He had a bit of luck in the innings that he played, but He's got a lot of work to do, I think, in terms of Test cricket, but he's a match winner. He's dynamic, and those kind of guys, you just got to have on your side. So, he's going to be a bit of a hit or miss player. That's the nature of T20 cricket, white ball cricket. He's got the strings to his bow. He can keep, and he's pretty good at that. And I just kind of think now that the team has just changed the dimension a bit with Conway coming in, because that means Tim Seifert is under pressure to play T20 cricket for the Blackcaps, and having Phillips around is adequate backup, I think. So he fits a couple of little areas that they need to bolster up from time to time. But I'll go back to my original point. He's got X factor. He can win you a game in half an hour, and you must have those kind of players. Not all the time, but you must have a couple of those in each side you pick.
In terms of cricket headlines around the world at the moment, there was some chat that the ICC are considering expanding the number of teams in the ICC T20 World Cup, seeing the shortest form of the game as the best opportunity for expansion. So they're talking about this year's edition will only have 16 teams, but the next could have 20. Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing, Hess?
Oh, personally, I like it. I think it's the one tournament where you can expand the game. I've also been involved a lot with some of those second-tier nations that go to those qualifying tournaments that put a huge amount of effort into it to try and qualify for the qualifiers. And the fact that they'll get that exposure, some of those individual players in those sides are certainly good enough to play it at the highest level. And then once they get those opportunities, then things can progressively move forward. I mean, you think of Nepal, you think of Lamachane, who plays in the IPL. He only got that opportunity through playing in some of those tournaments where he got a world event where he could turn up and perform in. But there are a number of players around the world who are sprinkled throughout those second-tier nations who would just love that opportunity and would certainly add to the experience of the tournament as well.
Smithy, I think it's a good thing. Do you?
Yes, I do, in terms of growing the game. There's no doubt about that. My only hesitation I have is that you've got to earn the right to play in world finals and world championships, and so I hope their pathway through there is not just a gift. And the other thing I worry about at World Cups and things, and you see it every now in a Rugby World Cup where a side comes along and gets beaten to a pulp, and then you wonder if it's done them any good. Some of these sides that come in are going to get some hidings because their skill factor and their team level is not going to be as good as some of the major nations. So there are going to be some whoppings, as long as they can tolerate that and the game can tolerate that, then they can have the odd surprise, which gives them that credibility. Yeah, I don't have a problem with it, expanding the game, but I still like to think that World Cups, you've got to earn your place and you've got to deserve to be there. It just can't be a gift for the sake of it.
The other headline, which I'm sure sent shivers down Cricket Australia's back, was Cameron Bancroft did an interview with The Guardian, and he was asked if it was just the three boys who were suspended, which of course was Bancroft, Smith and Warner, if it was only the three of them that knew about the ball tampering. And he said when it came to the bowlers, it was pretty self-explanatory. You just feel like this can of worms is never going to close right up, does it, Hess?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. You do get chucked the ball at the end of the over and look at whether you're going to get it naturally swinging or reversing. So you get a pretty good idea what sort of shape the ball's in. So I don't think that would surprise anyone, would it?
No, I don't think it's that. I think that it just keeps getting brought back up and more headlines and there it goes splashed all over. I mean, Cam Bancroft, I don't know. I just wouldn't talk about it anymore, Smithy, would you?
Well, he got lured into it, obviously. I'm not quite sure that was the main theme of the original interview. They probably glossed it up with his comeback to cricket or whatever and, how he was reassessing things after that setback. But all of a sudden they poked the curly question and he's got nowhere else to go. So I'm with Hess. I don't think I've ever seen in all the time I've commentated or played with guys, quick bowlers in particular, not show a real interest in the cricket ball itself because it's that it's all. So to imagine that none of the bowlers knew that there was something a little bit odd about the ball is stretching it a long way as far as I'm concerned.
Well, boys, thank you so much for your time today. Hess, I know you've got a quarantine meal to eat. Smithy, thank you for your time. And we will catch you next time on the Smith and Hesson podcast.